What's up, bro?
Aye.
There's not a rule that you have to use the 3 subs.
He's the best left back in Canada, without a doubt.
That's the final whistle, and for the second time since the MLS is Back tournament, the Portland Timbers eke out a 1-0 win against their Cascadian adversaries. Feel the magic in the air! Magic system! Red one,
It's the Third Sub podcast coming up right here on Twitter. Whitecaps, Timbers, coming up next. With your hosts, Alexander Gonge Ruzic and Samuel Rose.
Yo, that was pretty awesome, not gonna lie. Sam, how's it going?
Yeah, welcome everyone. So excited to do this. We obviously tried it out a little bit with some Canadian men's national team stuff, but we're back with a few more features, and it's Vancouver Whitecaps match day. Man, it's been way too long. I'm excited for this one.
I mean, like, where do we start? I mean, first of all, you look up here, you got this pretty nifty banner. You got a nice background, and I mean, before we dive into it, I mean, I'm Alexander Gongaruz. If you happen to not know me, obviously Samuel Rowan's joining us, but we'll extend a big thanks to producer Ben Steiner. He's the one who's been in charge of all this fancy graphic overlays to put our boring old faces on top of. So anything for all these aesthetic changes, you can give a big thanks to Ben for that. But I mean, boy, where to start for today? I mean, you got a big game, Portland Timbers. Game 1 of the season. I mean, you know, the hype was like sort of there heading into this weekend, and you just got to watch. I mean, the Whitecaps, they got the privilege of being the last teams. You got to watch a bunch of games. You got to get really hyped. You got to see that Canadian Classique yesterday between Toronto, Montreal, et cetera, et cetera. And then now just it's game time, really. It's game time. I can't believe that we're finally saying it. It's been too long.
Absolutely. And I mean, well, I'm just scrolling through Twitter here. I don't see the lineups up just yet, but I think we all have a pretty good sense of what the Whitecaps are rolling out. They certainly dropped some hints during their preseason matchup against the Chicago Fire, and given the visa issues and the quarantines, all the different things going on, injury concerns with some of the center backs, we kind of know where things are heading. So there's a bit of certainty on that front going into this one, but obviously a lot of questions that have to be answered on the pitch.
That's it. It's really going to be time to show up on the pitch. And there were a lot of upsets in MLS this weekend. I mean, it's hard to call them upsets. It's MLS. There's no upsets, but
there were surprise results. I mean, on opening day, even Houston takes 3 points. Like, they
looked good. Montreal pounded Toronto. I mean, yes, Toronto was undermanned, but for everyone to be saying Montreal's the 27th out of 27 team in the league,
yeah,
they took that personally. They looked good. It wasn't just that they won. They looked good. You look otherwhere. You know, DC United, a surprise team. They beat New York City 2-1. I wasn't expecting that. You know, across the board, there was big results. So if you're the Whitecaps, there's no reason why you can't go out today and think, okay, we can't win the game. There's no reason for that. But it's just going to take a committed performance. It's going to take a perfect performance. But there's certainly, it's not a David versus Goliath a game, so to speak. It's MLS. It's never like that. But it's going to be one where if they're not up to quality, they're going to get, destroyed, really. It's at the same time, Portland's a good team and they're going to take care of business. So if you're the Whitecaps, it's all about showing up, and from there, just seeing if you can snatch some goals, snatch a win.
Absolutely. I think that we talked about it on our preview show podcast. As we see Caleb Wilkins. Yes, indeed, this is where the cool kids hang out, Caleb. But yeah, as I was saying, we talked a little bit about on the show teams that these two guys have played very sheltered against each other. The last 2 matchups we saw, low scoring, tense affairs. The question I really have is, does either team try to open things up in this one, or does it go in a very similar way to what we saw in 2020? And maybe if the Whitecaps had their full swath of players available, that they'd feel differently. But I think given the lineup, I mean, other than swapping a Daber Caicedo for David Milinkovic or Freddie Montero, this is a very Whitecaps 2020 lineup rather than a 2021 lineup. So I anticipate they'll come out fairly defensive, fairly cautious, and just try to kind of, slowly work their way into the match. But, I'm always cheering for a high scoring one, although that's not necessarily what I'm expecting.
I mean, that's exactly it. And maybe to start, we'll bring in our first graphic here. We'll look at some Whitecaps players to watch today. And we've got a few, obviously we'll start off Lucas Cavallini. I think he's the main guy. If the Whitecaps are going to win today, I'd be very, very surprised if Cavallini doesn't have his finger stamps all over the game. Obviously, Janio Bikel, he's kind of both been our early pick for this year for unsung hero. Whenever he played at the number 6 last year, the Whitecaps won games. So hopefully he's starting there today. And then obviously Maxime Crepeau, almost a forgotten man in goal. We've almost, just forgotten his simple existence due to the strong play of Thomas Hasal and, everything that happened. So, Sam, maybe a bit of word on at least the 3 players to watch we picked, and maybe even someone else that you think could also make a sneaky impact today.
Well, yeah, Cava been on a scoring tear recently. He seems to like bagging goals in preseason, which is always good. And now you have the chance for it to hopefully translate on the pitch. And unlike last year, hopefully he can get a run of games to start the year and really build some consistency. Last year, missing out on MLS's back, missing a penalty early on, just it didn't get off to a great start. But now he has a chance to really hit the ground rolling. And as we've talked about previously, like competing for a starting spot for Canada, I think is a massive motivation. Janio Bikel, it's not a flashy game, but how important he is to this team, how, the little things he does off the ball. Max Crepeau, team MVP in 2019. As much as Thomas Hasal was great in his stints in 2020, it's going to be really good to have him back. And then I think you have to look at, these are players to watch, maybe not for the same reason as these 3, but I'm presuming Andy Rose and Ranko Vasilinovic at center back. To me, those are the 2 guys to watch in a lot of ways, because that's a position that's going to be challenged by some of Portland's attacking players that are quite gifted. So that's like Andy Rose and Ranko. I'm expecting, 10 plus clearances, 10 plus, defensive headers, that kind of stuff. We're going to see heavy volume, but can they survive it? There's a pathway to success here for the Whitecaps if they can, survive the first 30 minutes and settle in and keep the structure defensively. They certainly have a shot in this one, but I think those center backs for me, as much as they're maybe not the feature players, they're guys to definitely watch out for.
Well, just kind of before continuing on what you said, to hop on what Van City Bree said, just as a note, the 3 players to watch we picked are players that are going to play today. I think Kyle Alexandre, more specifically, is going to be a big piece for the Whitecaps this year. I think he's going to make a big difference. Unfortunately, he's stuck in I guess we'll call it quarantine limbo for now. It's not really limbo. At least we know when it ends, unlike, say, Ali Adnan and his visa actual limbo. But in terms of the players, I think it perfectly encapsulates the kind of game that it's going to be for the Whitecaps. You're going to need a strong performance from Crepeau in goal. You're going to need him to, hold the fort and keep things tidy if things do get a little sketchy. And then same with Janio Bikel. You're not going to see his impact, but you're definitely going to feel his impact as the game goes along. And then lastly, Cavallini, he's going to be needed to score the goals. But maybe if we're going to move to a new acquisition who we have highlighted as well, Daiber Caicedo. I think he has the potential to be a wild card today. He was brought in as an MLS young money player, as we know. So, it cost $2.5 million to bring him in. He's got a decent set of expectations on his shoulders. He's the 4th most expensive Whitecaps transfer of all time, comes to MLS from Colombia. Sam, what do you expect from Daiber Caicedo on his first game, if we're going to talk about pretty much the only transfer that's made it in time to play in this game?
Yeah, it's a good question. The first thing that comes to mind is twitchy athlete. He's very, very quick, quality of change of direction, but also quality of finishing from training really stood out in the little bit we got to see, and looked really comfortable against Chicago Fire. Maybe wasn't his ideal position with the Whitecaps, likely playing this 4-4-2. I don't think it's his best spot to show off everything he has to offer, but still a guy that I think can come in and make an impact right away. Does that mean he's, going to score a brace on his debut? Probably not, but I think you're going to have quality impact performances from the go with this guy. He's just got that right mentality, I think, to step in and fit into MLS comfortably.
That's it. I think he's certainly got a skill set needed for the Mark Dos Santos system. We had kind of, we've come up with the term Dos Santos winger. He is a Dos Santos winger. He works hard off the ball. He likes to play inside. He likes to, he's kind of good with both feet. He's good at attacking guys, but he's got for a young guy, he's good defensively for a winger, which isn't something we're used to seeing. So I certainly hope Dos Santos trusts him a little more than, say, some of the other good twitchy wingers he's had at his disposal in the past. We don't need to name any names there. But lineup's out already. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. No surprises again there. But do you think Caicedo can score today? Do you think would it be too outlandish to think he could maybe very well get off to a strong start, seeing that some other new faces in MLS this weekend have gotten off to fresh starts with their clubs?
It only takes one little moment, one little opportunity, right? So absolutely. And he's had enough of he's had a smoother preseason and roll into the season than someone like Ali Adnan has, or even all these guys that were away with Canadian duty, like Christian Gutierrez. He was away for a significant stretch. So I don't think preparation or lack of comfort within the team is an issue. I do wonder how much Portland's got a couple of interesting fullbacks, new additions, guys they've brought in. What will those matchups look like? Will Portland key in on Deiber Caicedo? I mean, you've got essentially, if you're Portland defensively, you have three players to really watch out for. You need to shut down Cavallini, Dahome, and Caicedo. And I think if you're sitting in that Portland locker room, you think that if you can do a good job of limiting those three, you're feeling pretty comfortable about the match. So I'm interested to see how the Timbers game plan for him, how he might adjust to it, how he deals with the physical play. If he gets, bowled over, knocked off the ball on his first couple possessions, how does he respond? But does he have it in the bag to score a goal? Absolutely.
And that's it. I think for me, I'm going to be most curious to see his adjustment to his first game in MLS. I think that's the most curious thing to see as a young prospect. Can you handle the physicality of MLS? Can you handle just, the helter-skelter nature of this league at times? And that can almost be an intimidating thing for a youngster. To be fair, he comes from a Colombian league where, it's not easy games every night. They play you hard in Colombia. It's kind of a similar chaotic nature to the league. And that's obviously why a lot of South Americans thrive in MLS, because they know that feeling of having to deal with just the chaos a bit. And travel is also another thing. Obviously no travel today. They're playing at home, as we'll like to now call it for Salt Lake. I wonder if we were going to keep up that term even when they leave Salt Lake. Maybe we'll have to call it the home away from home. But maybe moving on to some of the comments we're seeing. Chris, this is our first show, third sub. So welcome to our first live official pregame show. We're going to do many this year, and some post-game shows. So this is definitely, if you like what you're hearing, we're going to be here all year. And Bruno Gaspar, that's an interesting one. You maybe want to, we can have a bit of words on Bruno Gaspar moving down the list from Van City Breeze as well. I think he's going to play over Nerwinski personally, which is tough for Jake, just because I thought he was really good last year, and that's nothing a slight against Jake, but I just think an opportunity came to upgrade a position that was much needed for the Whitecaps, not for anything Jake Nerwinski did, but with Ali Adnan being as good of a fullback as he did, the field just tilted for him naturally. And bringing in a guy like Gaspar is going to bring a lot of balance to the Whitecaps. And frankly, they just lacked that balance at times last year. So I'm very curious to see what Bruno can bring when he's fit and when he's integrated into the lineup. I think having him and Adnan attack forward with someone like Bikel dropping back can provide a lot to Dos Santos tactically. And it's just something, unfortunately, that Jake Nerwinski, he offers a lot in some areas, but, in terms of pure attacking threat, he's more of a defensive stopper at this stage of his career. And you know what? I think there's value in that. There's 5 subs this year. If I'm Dos Santos, I wouldn't be afraid to use Adnan and Gaspar. And if the game, you need a defensive stopper, throw on Gutierrez and Nerwinski. You have 5 subs. Look at Matias Almeida over at San Jose. he uses his subs very aggressively, often swapping out the fullbacks based on the state of the game. I don't know, Sam, would you agree with me on that statement if I said, we always talk about the subs. DeSantos needed to make more subs, but do you think certainly Gaspar coming in gives a lot of gives Nerwinski value as a super sub, let's say?
I mean, sure, it's better to have that kind of depth as a sub than as a starter if you can get away with it, right? And we talked with Mark Dos Santos, I guess it was a couple weeks ago now, and a shout out to Hard Journalist for asking the question about whether or not Jake was a backup this year, and Mark was not happy about that question and emphasized the condensed schedule. So, or what if Bruno Gaspar? Okay, he's great. He provides that balance with Ali Adnan. You have dynamic options, but he picks up a knock and he's out for a week or two. Having someone like Nerwinski to come step in, that's a massive positive to have. I mean, we look at the bench depth right now, this starting lineup for match one, it's not very good, but the hope is that when you integrate these couple new additions into the squad, you integrate, a couple of the super draft guys, all of a sudden you're feeling a lot more confident about your bench depth. And that's not something the Whitecaps have been able to say for a number of years now. So hopefully they get to that point. But on day one, we're still a ways away from really seeing the effects of that, just based on everything that's been going on and the notable absences they still have.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we're going to look at this game in particular, kind of shifting away from Gaspar, it's a good question. How does DeSantos... If I had to be given if I had to gamble and be given an over-under on 3 subs tonight from DeSantos, I'm scared it's going to be, I'd reluctantly pick the under, and that scares me just because I think you look at your bench, it's not a bad bench. Theo Bair off of the bench gives you something different up top. Ditto with Ryan Raposo on the wings. Damiano Pasile, give him 20 minutes. He looked good in preseason. Reward his strong play. Heck, Gianfranco Faccinieri, if you need to, throw him in if you're somehow leading with 10 minutes left. Give him that experience of throwing him into the fire because, yeah, you look around the league. I mean, a lot of teams that are trusting their kids more and more are getting good results. Kids can play in MLS, but you have to trust them. And I think with DeSantos, the fact that he just hasn't been able to trust his youth, it's not cost him points or anything. It's not, maybe it has, maybe it hasn't, but it certainly, you would just like to see him be not afraid to turn to these players he's got because, yeah, I mean, I don't even know if that's a regulation bench. I guess MLS is sticking with a seven-man sized bench. I'm just used to seeing in Europe. I think they adapted it so you can have 2 goalies and like 8 subs or 9 subs. So I guess it is a regulation bench, but it would be nice to see, okay, you have to put these guys on the bench. We'll use them. You have 5 subs. I mean, it would be a bit weird not to be able to trust your young players and turn to them in a time at need. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just us.
Well, let's just say, there's a reason this show is called the Third Sub Podcast, and it's because our confidence in Mark DeSantos' ability or trust in using all of his available subs is relatively low. So it'll be interesting to see what the strategy is tonight. It's going to very much depend, I would think, on how the match is going, and maybe if it's 4-0 Portland, we see a big Pasile performance or something like that. But I'm not holding my breath in that department for sure.
Well, moving away from the Whitecaps, let's talk some Portland Timbers. And first, maybe we'll talk about the kind of the 3 players we highlighted to watch. And I'm just going to confirm the lineup because we did pick these beforehand. So it'd be nice if these 3 actually started. But we've picked Diego Valeri, who is starting. He's wearing the armband. Good. Eric Williamson, who is also starting, and Yemi Chara, who is also starting. So we went 3 for 3 on that one. But if you're the Whitecaps, it's going to be very interesting how they handle these 3 players. I think Diego Valeri, he's a guy who's hurt the Whitecaps a lot in the past, playing in between the lines, a true number 10. Sometimes I think this is where a guy like Janiel Bikel is going to have to do his dirtiest work, is containing a guy like Diego Valeri, making sure he's not comfortable, making sure he can, he doesn't have the space to operate. I think Eric Williamson is also a very interesting player to watch. He's a very good box-to-box midfielder. I was really impressed what I saw from him against Marathon. I think, someone like Baldissimo as well is going to have, him and Bikel are going to have stiff tasks trying to win that midfield battle because I don't think the Whitecaps need to win the midfield battle to win this game. They're not necessarily built to play like that tonight. But the quieter you keep those guys, the easier your task is going to be. And then lastly, Yimi Chara. He comes to this one. He scored a hat trick in midweek. He's starting to round into form after, a stop-start first season. Obviously, last year wasn't the easiest season for any player coming into MLS. He looks like a danger man on the wings. Can Christian Gutierrez handle him on right wing, that right wing versus left back battle? I'm curious to see. But Sam, maybe some thoughts on the Portland players to watch we have tonight.
I mean, I'm a big Yimi Chara fan. He's the underrated brother of the pairing and played super well against Marathon. So I've kind of, despite the fact that it's Portland and you love to root against them, I've kind of got a soft spot in my heart. Soft spot in my heart for Yimi. So definitely watching out for him. Williamson, he's going to test the Whitecaps midfield for sure. Diego Valeri, obviously every Whitecaps fan knows what he can provide. But Felipe Mora as well, always a danger man to watch out for. And as we pointed out in the preview show, much like the Vancouver Whitecaps, you need to be conscious, maybe not players to watch in a dangerous sense for Portland, but that center back pairing is probably their weakest point. So if you're the Whitecaps, that matchup, as I mentioned before, between Diber Caicedo, Lucas Cavallini, Christian Dahome against those center backs, can they work together, little 1-2s, plays off the ball to really get those guys moving, get them out of position, make them uncomfortable? It was a challenge in 2020 for the Whitecaps to do that. They didn't put pressure on the opposition often enough. And so with Portland's weakest point likely being their center back pairing, they need to find a way to do that tonight.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be something very interesting to monitor. And I think, can that midfield battle? And I think if we're going to maybe move on to our last player, we have specifically highlighted Diego Chara. I think if we're going to look at where this game is going to be won and lost for Portland, I think it's going to be Diego Chara. Can he, does he have the legs to keep up now at this age? He's getting up there in age. He played midweek. The Whitecaps fans, you know what you're going to get from him. He's a solid number 6. He destroys in the middle. He made MLS best last year. He's played 280 Timbers games. That's just wild to see how much he's played. As Jan says, Diego Chara could be dangerous. He is a complete engine of a man, and 174 recoveries in 2020. That is just a mind-boggling stat that he recovered the ball on an average of something like 5 times a game. If you're the Whitecaps, I mean, you don't have a number 10, so you're not having anyone battle specifically against that. But just what he could do defensively for the Timbers, it could really make or break. Someone say like Cavallini. If Cavallini is getting robbed of service because Diego Chara is just everywhere in midfield, that it's just going to make the Whitecaps game plan infinitely harder to work. So, I mean, Diego Chara, yeah, what a player.
I mean, destroy and progress to the max, right? This is like the ultimate destroy and progress type, but not necessarily in that, massively physically imposing format. Just the work rate, the grittiness, the determination. A guy you love to have on your squad but hate to play against, right? I know that's a bit of a hockeyism, so to speak, but I think it definitely applies. Like, he is just the grit and grind that really typified MLS for a long time, but his play style has sustained through, if you want to call it MLS 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, it's something that remains valuable throughout all those stages. So going to be a challenge, whether it's, there isn't a number 10 to match up against directly, but you can see Dahome kind of playing off Cavallini. He's certainly going to have to deal with that. Bakel and Baldissimo, guy like Baldy, if he wants to create in the midfield, if he wants to get a little involved offensively, he's going to have to deal with that as well. So player to watch, absolutely. Worthy of his own graphic.
And just to, get an idea of where the Whitecaps are heading into this game, this is, it's a tough opponent. In the 2020 MLS standings, the Portland Timbers, I think the graphic will pop up shortly here. They finished, significantly ahead of the Whitecaps, nearly a 15-point difference. They were a different class in the league, and they've brought back a lot of the same players. And to bring back one of your points earlier, the Whitecaps are bringing, to start the season, this is going to be a very similar team to the one they had last year. And I think it's going to be curious to see how these two teams match up as a result. Obviously, we talked about the matchup battles and what the players offer, but can the Whitecaps prove that maybe they said last year they believed they were a playoff team? Well, you and I certainly felt that statement was a bit egregious. Well, this is a chance for them to prove that they are, they're a bit better than what they showed last year, and that they can keep up with the Portlands of the world.
Well, this is the opportunity to prove that, pointing to those last 7 matches of the season last year has some validity, right? Because we saw the Whitecaps play the Timbers at the end of last season. That wasn't necessarily a banner match for them. It was probably, I guess, in terms of play style, it was all right, but just in terms of result, it wasn't fantastic. So if they think they've made strides and just kind of elevated from within throughout this offseason, because there's been this two-pronged approach where Axel Schuster and Mark Dos Santos not only think that they've added the right pieces, they also think a lot of the players in the locker room have gotten better and improved. You can't prove too much tonight. I mean, it's only one match, but you can at least go a long way to proving the work that you've put in the offseason and the players that have taken a jump from 2020 to 2021. So it's all in their hands. And frankly, if you're a supporter, it's like you gotta see it tonight in order to be convinced.
Well, it's just going to be, if we're going to talk about Portland, something that's worth highlighting as well from a Portland perspective, as Caleb duly noted, but it is a very good fact. Portland did really overperform their XG. So while there was a big gap in the standings last year, a lot of it was maybe due to the style. Obviously, Portland, when you have good players, stats like XG tend to, you can overperform XG when you've got talented finishers, like, just going down the list, Diego Valeri, obviously at number 10, Jeremy Obobase up top, Felipe Mora, et cetera, et cetera. They've got finishers. That makes sense. But if you're the Whitecaps, you do have to wonder, okay, at the end, yes, the Whitecaps were an XG tire fire last year. I don't think we need to talk about how bad they were XG-wise.
We're going to get into some advanced analytics about the Whitecaps last year just for fun.
We will. We do have a few stats for that later. But, I mean, the Whitecaps in the last 10 games this season, their XG numbers did stabilize to a decent level. And when they played the Timbers, it was a pair of 1-0 games where XG was quite even between both teams, which I find, for whatever reason, the Whitecaps matched well against Portland last year. So I wonder, can they do the same this year? Can they show that, okay, 1-0 last year, it wasn't just because we sat 8 men behind the ball at every opportunity and really just focused on keeping Portland out of the net? Well, okay, you've got someone like Cavallini who's informed, Dahome, Caicedo now on the board, who can do some damage in transition. I do wonder if, okay, they're going to try to prove those 1-0 results weren't flukes, that of just them trying to do some damage control, let's say, and they're actually more of a byproduct of what they believe they can actually do as a team. Absolutely.
Well, let's dive into a little bit of the 2020 numbers and taking a look at the points for improvement. So I was doing a little diving on StatsBomb, which Nikos Overhill, who's now with the club, should definitely be familiar with. This is what the Whitecaps are facing heading into 2021. Everyone knows last in MLS for possession. That's not an advanced stat, but last in MLS for touches in the final third, not involved in the penalty area often enough. Only they were second last in touches in the penalty area, only beat out in that department by FC Cincinnati. They also had the most touches, as you can see, in their own penalty area. So all kind of, possession of the ball, but in the wrong spots on the pitch. And then something that really stood out to me was the fewest progressive carries. So that's an instance where someone takes the ball and progresses it upfield on their own, so a darting run, so to speak. And they had the fewest of those in MLS, and it wasn't super close, and they were very far away from any of the elite or even, I would say, playoff quality teams in MLS. So Michael Baldissimo, he's going to be a guy that has to provide those progressive carries, that has to provide those progressive passes that lead to touches in the final third, that lead to fewer touches in their own penalty area. That's going to be a key. Obviously, Caio Alessandre, when he arrives, when he's ready to go, is going to be a huge part of that as well as the fullbacks, missing Ali Adnan, missing Bruno Gaspar. But you have to, if you're Mark Dos Santos, as we see on screen, you have to confront those areas and find a way to overcome them. And you can't defeat those stats tonight, but you can take a step in the right direction towards pushing this team, further away from the bottom of these underlying numbers and at least into the middle of the pack, because even if you're a counter-attacking team, it's not a sustainable play style looking at those 4 points right there, as well as a lot of the other stuff. These were just the ones that kind of stood out to me.
Well, kind of looking at that graphic, I'll pose to you the question. You kind of touched on it a bit. Who from tonight's roster, who is either returning or obviously the one debutant in Caicedo, do you think there's anyone in that roster who could potentially bring a difference? I mean, one player I'll highlight that didn't get a lot of minutes last year who's going to get a start, Christian Gutierrez. I wonder how much.
For sure, same player on both of my mind as well. He can have an impact.
Yeah, because I wonder on the left last year when he played with Ali Adnan, he kind of got a, as funny as it seems to say about a guy like Gutierrez who's so young, he was kind of almost babysitting Adnan defensively. He often came in late at games or played when they were both on the same flanks. This is a rare start for Gutierrez where he's on his own and gets a chance to show his skills. And we forget that he's actually a pretty good attacking fullback from his time in Chile. I wonder if someone like him could fill a bit of the load left by Adnan. I think another player, obviously you mentioned him, Baldissimo. This is going to be, again, a rare start for him alongside Bakel, a rare start in general. Mark Dos Santos clearly backs him to the point where he went on record publicly saying that he's the most ready academy player, which is a whole other story on its own. But I'm curious to see if Bakel playing deep, if we see Baldissimo as an 8 today, just to help the Whitecaps ease the load of their creativity, see him play kind of like what Leonard Owusu did last week, where Leonard Owusu was popping up in some really good areas. And I'm just thinking of the quality that Baldissimo has in his final pass. Might we see Baldissimo play more of an 8? When we saw him last year, he played more of a natural 6. And to be fair, he is a 6, but he can also play an 8. So for me, those two players might be two key players. Obviously, Caicedo, if Mark Dos Santos is going to play him deeper, like he kind of is in this weird right mid role, I'd like to see him progress the ball more and kind of drive at the Portland defenders, because if they're going to have to find gaps, because Portland's fullbacks from when watching against Marathon, they were really, really aggressive. Well, someone like Caicedo is going to have a lot of space to exploit as well. So I'm curious to see if he can do some damage in that, just based on his role. He's not really a number 10, but he's almost going to, I feel like, operate like one, just the way he cuts in and is going to have to kind of play between the lines. So he could be a very interesting player to watch.
Well, producer Ben, let's throw up the lineup graphic for the Whitecaps and talk a little bit. I want to answer Bo's question about bench options. Let's address that a little bit. I think when we look at that list, I can definitely see Ryan Raposo, in replacement of Deiber Caicedo in the last 15, 20 minutes of the match. You can also see, I don't know, it depends on how Cava's feeling, how Dahome's feeling, but you have to, well, I don't know. This is an interesting one to bring up. I think we're going to find out right away. Is it Theo Bair or is it David Egbo who's the first choice off the bench?
Oh, that's going to be a tough. I really hope it's Theo Bair.
I would hope it's Theo Bair, and especially based on just the form and the amount of training, right? I mean, yes, okay, producer Ben wants to see David Egbo get some action, but at the same time, that would be a lot really quick. I want to throw in a shout for Pat Metcalf to get a performance if need be, especially if it was something I wanted to bring up, Alex, when you were talking a little bit about the midfield. My concern still with this formation is that, with Tybert in that left wing role, and if the Whitecaps are getting overrun in the midfield, if two central midfielders is not enough, do they bring in a Pat Metcalf for Russell Tybert and change the way they play so they have three more classically central midfielders in the second half? I'd be curious to see if that happens. I look at Facineri, I look at Pasil. I don't see those guys getting many minutes, if any, in this one, but I definitely Raposo as winger depth, Bair off the bench, then possibly Patrick Metcalf. But to be honest, those are the only three I can really see coming in and making an impact.
Yeah, no, I think it would have to be Bear, Metcalf, Raposo. Pasil would be a real bonus, and I mean, just to kind of go off of Bo's question that popped up, Ricketts is out injured as well. He's on the lengthy injury list that the Whitecaps
the Eric
have.
Godoy, Derek Cornelius treatment. I believe they didn't travel. None of those three guys traveled to Chicago, correct? So
yeah, it's all maintenance for Ricketts. But as for the players on the bench, Damiano Pasile is the one again for me who I'm curious to see, because like you mentioned, I think DeSantos is going to have to go to Raposo, Metcalf, and Bear at some point, be it, just for tactics, but even just I feel like for fitness, he's going to have to give some players some rest after a while. I feel like someone like Michael Baldisimo, can't picture him going longer than 70. Someone like, Caicedo, who's new to the league, I wonder if he's going to get maybe, a rest after 70 minutes, etc. Those three I could see making an appearance, but will Pasile come in? Again, just like I said, off of preseason, and maybe this is a good way to transition into one of our last graphics we have here, our preseason takeaways. I thought if we're going to go to preseason, going to that second point in particular, I thought Damiano Pasile was one amongst many kids who looked really good. And obviously Bear was, Bear and Raposo or some of them, those are all guys who are already in the fold. They've already kind of, Bears played 20 plus MLS games. Baldisimo, it's played a lot of games. Metcalf has only played 5, but he's kind of established. Someone like Damiano Pasile was only signed to a contract late last year and played those 10 minutes. He's really one of the lone kids from preseason who's going to get a chance to get an opportunity here. I mean, look at some of the guys we liked, like Keishan Francois, Mateo Campagna, Cameron Habibullah. They're not signed a first-team deal yet. They probably won't be for a while. That's okay. But someone like Pasile, he'd be a good example for some of those kids I mentioned. Okay, if you play well in preseason, if you continue to work, you'll get a shot at the first-team level. So I'd want to see him do well. And maybe shifting our talk to I'll let you finish, jump in what I said before we can go to the other takeaways.
I mean, yeah, I love the kids are all right. It's not a battle we're gonna win, right? I mean,
no, never is.
Ultimately, the voting power does not lie in the media, and this has been a 3-year battle now of, kind of us hyping up the youngsters and Mark DeSantos throwing cold water on the smoke, on the fire, and trying to take us back a notch. So it was really great. The amount of integration, the amount of experience that these young guys got throughout the preseason was fantastic. I do think that the fairy tale is coming to a bit of an end, unfortunately. The hope still, though, is that, if we could see a Pasile come off the bench and have an impact performance in this one, because the door is kind of wide open based on the lack of depth, that's the dream. But I expect very limited substitution usage in this one. And again, it's a game flow dependent thing where if the match plays out the way that we're anticipating, which is both of us picked a relatively low scoring, tense affair, I don't see much confidence being given in the young players. Even a guy like Pat Metcalf, like when we spoke with Mark DeSantos coming off the U23s, he was very insistent and intentional in pointing out the fact that, hey, the U23 tournament is a different level of competition than MLS. And just because they had success at that tournament doesn't mean they're going to have success in MLS. And to me, that felt like a pointed comment at Patrick Metcalf, to be honest, at least the way that I read it. So, as much as we're certainly flying the banner and, touting the quality preseason that a lot of these guys have had, I'm not expecting a massive amount of integration, but dare to dream.
Well, I mean, moving on quickly, we'll take a look at Portland's lineup before maybe going into some predictions for tonight. And for the predictions, we'll bring in producer Ben here for his first appearance. But quickly going down the list, pretty expected lineup: Steve Clark in goal, Van Rankin and Bravo at fullbacks, Mabiel and Zuprich at the back. They're an interesting pair to watch because, again, they're solid, traditional, no-nonsense center backs, but they're a little up there in age. Speed is a bit of an issue. I want to see Dahome and Cavallini exploit that if possible. Diego Chara is obviously providing a shield to them, making it hard, so you're gonna have to play through him. Eric Williamson joins him in midfield. Yemi Chara, Diego Valeri, and surprisingly, Daron Esprilla, after a pretty mixed performance in midweek, joins his two of the players we highlighted. And then up top, Felipe Mora gets a start. Solid lineup, but returning. Ben, hop in and join us. We'll do some. Any wacky prediction. Anyways, before we go into that, everyone, this is producer Ben who's doing all the nice work behind the scenes. So give a shout out to him for all the good work he's done. But do we want to start with what Bo said? Wacky predictions for tonight. Do you have a wacky prediction for today? Sam, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, goodness. Wacky prediction for this match specifically. Do I want to go out on a limb? No, I can't. I really wanted to go out and say that, the Whitecaps are going to control more of the possession, but I can't do that to myself.
It's a wacky prediction. Come on.
I don't see it going that way. Okay, I'm going to say that my wacky prediction, this is going to be twice in a row now that I'm on the Patrick Metcalf bandwagon, but I'm going to say that the 4-4-2 is not working, and at halftime, Russell Tybert comes off and Metcalf comes into the midfield, and the Whitecaps play much better in the second half. I don't think that's going to happen, but I really hope it does, because I don't know. I feel like Portland's going to have this flat 4-4-2 with the Blaise Matuidi role figured out, and they're gonna expose it in the first half, and it's going to lead to some necessary changes. That's just kind of the way I see it going.
Well, I mean, okay, Ben, to throw it to you, wacky prediction. You got one?
Well, most of the time on these games, I like to say Russell Tybert's going to score because he's been around for years. He's scored,
and he's good in Cascadia. He's really good in Cascadia.
I think he scored 3 goals in his Whitecaps career. 2 goals against the LA Galaxy. What was that, like 2012 or 2013? And then he scored one against Toronto as well. If you guys are here from the beginning of the show, we actually had that goal against Toronto in our highlight pack that we'll also play on the outro. But I'm going to go with my wacky prediction is Russell Tybert gets a goal. In the Between the Sticks preview and predictions that we did, I also had Russell Tybert scoring a goal. So every game this season, Russell Tybert scores a goal. He's not playing in the starting lineup tonight, I don't believe, but I think he comes off the bench and is that big offensive boost for the Whitecaps.
No, he's in the starting lineup, Ben.
Well, then he'll score maybe off the first kick. We'll say they'll do their usual long ball right off the first kick, pass it right back, long ball up, Tybert on the wing. He gets it, skills to the entire team, and Tybert makes it 1-0 for the Whitecaps in the first few minutes. But that would be certainly a wacky prediction, I would say.
Absolutely.
If that happens, wow. Well, for me, I'm going to have to say it. Mark DeSantos is going to find a way to make all 5 subs tonight. That's my wacky prediction. He's going to somehow inspired enough to turn to his bench and be like, Damiano, Ryan, whoever else is on the bench, David, Theo, Patrick, I'll go on. Heck, you might even throw Gianfranco Faccineri in there. That's my wacky prediction. He somehow, some way uses 5 subs with such a young bench. That would be for me the very wacky prediction. If it's going to happen, who knows or not. But again, moving on to predictions, score predictions. Sam and I, we've already shared ours on the 3rd sub, but we'll rehash it. So Ben, we'll let you go first for your score predictions today. There's no bad predictions. If you said 5-0 Whitecaps, I'd believe you. But I'm curious to hear what you have to say on wacky or score predictions now.
Well, I mean, I bet on sports, so the Whitecaps winning would be fantastic. Their odds are fantastic if they do win, but I just can't see it happening. I'm going to have to say it's going to be 3-1 Portland. I think Cavallini gets himself a goal for the Whitecaps. He can do stuff without much help. He'll just barge his way through the Portland Timbers defense, but can the Whitecaps win? Not with this lineup. This is 2020 Whitecaps, and we saw on the standings board earlier, the 2020 Whitecaps weren't very good. Sure, it was a weird year, but they weren't a very good team. So I think Cavallini gets himself a goal, but in the end, it's a Portland Timbers 3-1 win.
Interesting. Well, I'll hop on that. I went wacky. I'm going for a 1-1 Whitecaps draw. They're going to break the 23-game draw streak, or it's something like nearly 30-game draw streak. They obviously didn't draw a game last year. It's MLS. It's opening weekend. Always bet the underdog in MLS opening day weekend. If that's the one lesson I've learned, I'm going to go 1-1. And if I had to pick a goal score, screw it. Shout out to the guys over at 90 Plus. They're doing a prediction giveaway thing. I went for Andy Rose. If you just saying Mark DeSantos, the first 2 years under Mark DeSantos, who scored the first ever goal under Mark DeSantos? Eric Godoy off a set piece. Who scored the opening goal last year? I'm pretty sure. Let me just remember. It was Jake Nowinski, another defender in the box. Defenders, for some reason, under DeSantos, score goals in opening games. Heck, in his first year, Daniil Henry also scored on opening day. Andy Rose is going to continue that streak and score. Then as for Portland, we'll go for the good old, the boring we'll go for a Diego Valeri goal just for him to remind us, how good he is and how that the Whitecaps don't actually have a number 10. But Sam, I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this prediction publicly before, so it's not a huge surprise. But I'm going fairly chalk. It's a Timbers 2-1 win. I'm also going relatively chalk in terms of goal scorers. It's going to be Lucas Cavallini for the Whitecaps. It's going to be a Felipe Mora brace for Portland. We're going stock with this one, but it just feels that's kind of there's been enough wacky opening day matches. I feel like this one's going to kind of go according to plan. So, yeah, not too outside the box. I like if it's going to be off the board, I like the Russell Tybert. I like the Andy Rose. That's a good way to go with it. I'd also give a shout if you want to go off the board in terms of Whitecaps goal scorers. Michael Baldissimo free kick goal. I feel like if there was a prop bet on that, I might throw $2 or $3 on it because I'm sure those odds would be probably longer than the actual likelihood of it. So yeah, if there's a Baldi screamer, I'm here for it for sure.
Well, this one's an interesting. I'll go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
We can make all these wacky predictions, right? But I think in realism, it's probably going to be Cavallini or Caicedo who gets the opening goal. And for Caicedo, I'd like him to get a debut goal, but it was our random Whitecap of the day on the Between the Sticks Twitter account today. We know that scoring your debut doesn't always mean a lot of success in the future. It was Octavio Rivera we featured earlier today. And we all know how that story went down. Octavio Rivera with the Whitecaps, I think he scored 3 goals in 5 games to start off his Whitecaps career. And then was just another dud in the striker graveyard that is BC Place.
Well, at least up until 2016, that is. After once Freddie Montero, he scored 15, Kai Kamara scored 12. I feel like that, especially now with Cava, that's kind of died. But you do bring a good point. Certainly, there's a few curses. There's the curse that really needs to be broken just because I like Damian Pasila in the making your debut on the last game of the season curse. Hopefully that curse can get erased. Obviously scoring a striker on your debut. I think Kai Kamara must have broken. Actually, did he score on his debut? I don't know if he did actually, because I think it was only maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But maybe that is a curse worth keeping an eye on. But moving on to other prop bets and other things. Bo, it's popped up on the screen. Are we gonna get a VAR howler? What's the money we sang on that one? It's Vancouver Whitecaps. VAR, not their best friend. It works so great in MLS for all 26 teams, but when it comes to the Whitecaps, it's just been less than question. It's been questionable. Sam, do you think there's gonna be a VAR howler tonight?
I think the goals are going to be clean. I don't know why it's a feeling I have, but I think it's going to be relatively chalk, relatively traditional. But yeah, VAR rears your head when its ugly head when you least expect it. So I never say never on that front, but obviously I certainly hope not. Who's officiating this one? That's a big question.
That's a good question.
Definitely something to watch out for.
Let's see something if I can pull up. You know what? It's Whitecap soccer. I feel like we're going to see a VAR howler. But you know what? It's a new year. It's going to go against the Timbers. I feel like Lucas Cavallini is going to score an offside goal, and it's just not no one's going to notice anything. It's going to kind of be like the Higuain goal today where, you know what? Yes, he was offside, but at this point, like, who cares, really? After what, the Premier League, on one hand, I don't think Premier League's, VAR is really that egregious. Yes, yes, it's a bit, you can question the integrity of using toenails to determine whether or not there's offside. It's the law. You can't, it more highlights problems with the law versus the problems with the technology. All they're doing is just showing how obscene some of these laws are. At least in MLS, you know what, they've gone screw it. Let's just, leave it. And there's something pure about that. So I can see the argument in both sense. I like that the VAR in MLS is so much more like, unless it's the Whitecaps for some reason, it's so much more just natural and okay, there's less chaos just because they kind of trust officials to make gut decisions, but you can kind of see the flip side of what happened in the Premier League.
I'm team ruthless robot overlords. Like, I don't, if a toenail's offside, he's offside. And I get frustrated with MLS in the way that, you've implemented a system that's supposed to take human error out of the equation, and then you've just added human error back into it. I don't really okay, yes, you have the technology, but then the implementation is through individuals. And then so you end up with the exact same problem where, okay, now it's not an issue of making the call, but it's more an issue of interpretation and when VAR is used. So as much as the Premier League system definitely has its flaws or it has its moments where you screen cap something and go, how on earth does this make sense? But at least the law is clear and it's followed to a T. And I think I can respect that more than the unpredictability. So yeah, just, just some of the laws need to be looked at. Like,
absolutely.
I'll say that as much as the next guy, but I do like the very clear implementation of it. And until that point, we're definitely going to get, as Bo said, some VAR howlers.
Yeah, and I mean, just saying, as pointed out by Ben, I have confirmed here, Alan Chapman is the referee, and the VAR is Victor Rivas. I don't know much about Victor Rivas, but Alan Chapman, he always is a mixed bag. I feel like he's not one of the guys who's up there in terms of, okay, you're scared for your life when you see him refereeing, but never know what you're gonna get there. Hopefully, it's a clean game. That's always what you hope for, and maybe moving on to some of these questions. Who do you think is going to be the how do you put this in a term?
The pot stir of the match.
That's one great way to put it. The pain in the backside of the match. I don't know. For the Whitecaps,
Yannick Bakel, definitely.
I feel like he's too nice almost though for a six.
He can be a ruthless tackler though when he wants to be, and he's going to be in that midfield, in the midfield trenches. So I feel like that's going to be a point of contention in this one. I'd say Lucas Cavallini, but I think he's going to be left on an island a lot, and so maybe not quite as involved. So that's why I'd go with Bakel in this one.
I mean, yeah, for me it has to be Cavallini, kind of like Bo just said, and like what you said as well. If not, maybe I wouldn't be surprised to see some Gutierrez pot stirring. First start.
I like it.
So some of that Chilean league, what they do in Chile, just to kind of go stir the pot at left wing, up with Yimi Chara, get in his head, showing that you're not scared of playing Yimi after the hat trick. I want to see some of that disturbance from him today. That would be pretty funny to see them do that. But I don't know. Do you think? I'm just curious to see what Goody has to offer tonight. Again, he's just been one of my players to watch, and I'm curious to see what he brings to the table.
Well, it would have been ditto with Leo Wusu had he been available and uninjured, right? Because those are the two guys that really stood out from preseason. And as we mentioned, it's the guy that Mark Dos Santos has really talked a lot about in the offseason, a coach that doesn't talk a lot about individual players. And so, yeah, what can he do? And then what kind of problem does that create when Ali Adnan comes back? But also Ali Adnan doesn't have his U.S. visa yet. So it's going to be a while before, like, Goody's going to get a run of, I hesitate to say, at least 3 matches, if not 4, right? He's going to get this run. And I also think Goody, in terms of his Whitecaps tenure, he's never had that kind of certainty at the position. He can look at those next couple of matches and go, yeah, I'm going to be a starter, and I can mentally prepare for that. So I'm massively excited to see what he has to offer. I guess the only thing I would add is that it's a little disappointing he didn't get a 30, 45 minute showing for Canada before hitting the ground running in that MLS preseason, because I think that would have been really good for his confidence. But it didn't look like it affected him against Chicago because he looked great.
Maybe to close things up, I think we've reached the end of the road for Whitecap stuff and Portland stuff today. I mean, anything else do we want to talk about? Do we want to maybe a quick word on that joke of a Super League that's going to happen in Europe next, or supposedly as soon as this year? Maybe before we wrap up the show and call it a night, and we'll watch the game.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll keep it brief. I mean, it's a realization. It's a exemplification of a lot of what's been going on at the top levels of club football over the last 10, 15 years, where owners and boardrooms, so to speak, are making decisions, in the absence of supporters, in the absence of, kind of community operated clubs. And I think it's just the outrage I've seen today is not necessarily, I mean, yes, it's about the Super League, but I think it's a general frustration with the way that a lot of these global clubs don't represent the communities that they used to. And we're just seeing all of that kind of like stirred up to the surface. So I don't know. I don't want to make any hasty, like general, this is something that we're just getting a ton of information on now. It's going to develop massively over the weeks to come. And so I don't want to make any grand proclamation about it. I mean, to a certain extent, it's like all football is good football. I'll be excited to watch whatever it is, even if it's some frankly laughable competition. But at the same time, it brings up, I think it's just a real talking point for a lot of the things that are wrong with, club football at a really high level right now. And yeah, we're just going to have to see where it goes. But obviously not a big fan. Like, I think it kind of goes without saying.
Well, I'm definitely not going to be joining you and watching in that case. That's for sure. I just think
I want to see Arsenal get crushed by everyone in that league. So that's appointment viewing for me.
Maybe I'll watch some illegal highlights just to like not support the people trying to gain a buck off of it. But for me, I think we have an interesting perspective of someone who follows MLS, which is a very similar concept to a Super League. If you think about it,
in a lot of ways, it's once you think about it,
it's just, at least in MLS, they were starting from scratch. They're trying to, implement themselves. They made sure there's a lot of parity and stuff like that. Again, I'd like to see them open up shop and make, pro rel, etc., make it more of an open game for everyone across the continent to, participate in and have a dream of, being a 10th division club in England and one day being a Premier League team that makes the Champions League. But for Europe, they have that history. There's no reason for them to erase it. Say it's not like MLS where they're just kind of, capture sports fans' imaginations in a world where there's already NFLs and MLBs and NHLs and the Big Four to compete with. In Europe, there is no reason for such a Super League, change like this. It's frustrating. It is very frustrating because the Champions League it's a good system. I mean, yes, it's a bit of a money grubbing system at its base, and you look back to the creation as someone mentioned to me earlier. It isn't a Champions League anymore, and I agree. I'd like to see less clubs from certain leagues. I'd like to see it reduced and see more of a general representation, but it is pretty, it's an open system. A team from Bulgaria could win the league and play in the Champions League. There's something magical about that. And just under this Super League, it's just so money grubbing and it's just, there's nothing to really like there, but I don't have much else to say. I don't want to rant. Lastly, Chris, is there any names on the back of this jersey? Boy, is there ever. I got the legend himself, Tony Chaney. He is on a good thing we're at the end here. He's on both of the kits. Actually.
Wow.
I got them on
true sale. Tony Chaney super fan. Love to see it.
I got them both on sale at the club sale when I was like 17. He was my favorite player. I couldn't say no. Number 16. The Whitecaps miss like a player like him at the number 6, in my humble opinion. Too bad he's turned into a fashion designer. I feel like he's still got a lot to give on the footballing side of things, but that's a whole other story.
Well, I honestly, I cannot think of a better place to end our first Vancouver Whitecaps pregame show than with double Tony Chaney jerseys. So thank you everyone for tuning in, for hanging out with us, for getting ready for the start of the 2021 MLS regular season and the Vancouver Whitecaps regular season. It's been an awesome ride so far. And for everyone who's been supporting the podcast and stuff, thank you so much. And Alex, over to you.
Yeah. I mean, on that note, you can find us on Twitter at Third Sub Pod. We'll drop an episode within the next few days, depending on the game. And just for those, if you enjoyed the show, we're going to do obviously pregame shows pretty much before most games this season, if possible. Obviously if something comes up, we'll figure things out. But we'll also be doing post-game shows circumstantially. I know us personally, I don't know if, a 10 p.m. post-game show on a Sunday night might not be the wisest for everyone just because work, etc., school. But, definitely for earlier Sunday games, Saturday night games, Friday night games, Saturday afternoon games, we will do some post-game content as well. But it was just a blast to chat live. Obviously, the interactive comments was a blast to have you guys. If you enjoyed it, tell a friend, tell them to tune in next time. But on that note, enjoy the game. You can find us on Twitter, at least for me, at Alex Gungaruzik, Sam at Samuel_Rowboat. Final message from Bo, #FreeTheo. I completely, vehemently support that message. On that note, see ya, and we'll catch you next time.
That's the final whistle, and for the second time since the MLS is back tournament. The Portland Timbers eke out a 1-0 win against their Cascadian adversaries.
Feel the magic in the air. Magic System, Red One, Showkey.
The Third Sub podcast coming up right here on Twitter. Whitecaps, Timbers coming up next. With your hosts, Alexander Gonge Ruzic and Samuel Rose.